Well, hello, everybody. It's good to be back. Thank you for asking. It's a trip we didn't expect to take back to Texas, but our daughter's doing well. She had unexpected surgery. So now we've got a great program ahead of us. So first of all, see if we can get this right. Ned Sogan's not here. Who's making a difference? We are. How are we making a difference? Yay! Good job. Jimmy Sudfin, our recognition committee chair.
Morning, Breakfast Clubbers. Recognition. I thought it was interesting on the cover of the Hub Times, they talked about the family donating hair to others while they're battling a rare cancer. And the reference was the Schweikert family attends the Wigs for Kids, and it was at Hattie Larum. And of course, Roseanne Drake is one of our members. Is Roseanne here this morning? Anyway, I thought that was kind of nifty, and it was quite an interesting article. And then I have an old friend by the name of Jim Lesko, who is a Rotarian for Lakewood Rocky River, and he was on the front page of the Universe Bulletin this week where he had donated a kidney to Father Joe Manich. And this guy, you talk about a busy Rotarian, Jim Lesko from Lakewood Rocky River. He's the foundation chair for the Rotary Club District 6630. He's on the bylaws committee. He's in the leadership development and the Rotary Peace Fellowship. So that's one of our recognizable Rotarians.
We'll do our check presentation. We'd love to give away money. And then, Chris, you should be finished breakfast, so we'll let you introduce the guest right after.
Thank you, Madam President. It's always an honor to go before Chris in the morning. Thank you very much. In my role as president of the Hudson Rotary Foundation, probably one of the most rewarding opportunities I have during the course of the year is simply being in front of you and recognizing, those organizations and people who, really bring great activities and value to our communities. And this morning we have an opportunity to share some of our appreciation in the form of a financial award. Our Hudson Services Committee and an organization certainly does a lot of work across the year in raising funds for the Lighting on the Green project, which has really become a holiday tradition and a great asset to the community, one we all expect and enjoy throughout the season. So it's my pleasure this morning to present to you Barbara Boz, who is representing the group, to accept the check for $500. Barbara? Congratulations on behalf of the Hudson Rotary Foundation and the Hudson Rotary Club. So we all appreciate Barbara. Thank you, Barbara. Sure, please do.
Thank you so much for inviting me for breakfast, and thank you very much for that generous check. I'm part of the Hudson Light Brigade this year. It's a combination of the Hudson Community Service Association, which is arranging the lighting. And this year, or it's coming to the past few years, the green has used all the lights it can because of the electricity power problem. We're switching over to the LED lights, which use less lights, but that is a big cost. And so this year there's a really big push for having new lights. They're going to look great. They're not the old lights. They look great. We've been testing them since January. You're going to love it. It's great. And this way we can light more lights on the trees, because the trees keep growing, need bigger strings of lights, but we can't put more lights on. So that's part of the push this year. It's very helpful. The Friday after Thanksgiving, please come at 5 o'clock. We turn on the lights that the Hudson Community Service Association has provided to the city. The Merchants of Hudson are involved in promoting refreshments afterwards, and there's always the chance Santa will come. He has for many years. And the Hudson League for Service is the third partner in the event. We provide the music and the songbook so you don't have to know the words. So come, rain or shine, 5 o'clock, the Friday after Thanksgiving to the Gazebo Green, and just be there for the thrill of seeing your generous donation turn on the lights. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Rotarians and visitors. We have a lot of visitors with us today, and I would like to announce their names, and if they could please stand up so we can give them a nice warm welcome. First, we do have Barbara Boz representing Lighting on the Green Committee, and then we have our 3 speakers today, Christina Rogner, Tom Parker, and David Warhatch. And we have, thank you, and we have George Roth, guest of Rich Warfield, and we have Joe Woolbridge, wife of Bill Woolbridge. Thank you all for visiting us and joining us today.
Do we have music today, James? We know what that means, don't we? It's time to play.
We might need you to sing it. There we go.
No, wrong
The story
music.
we're about to see
Jeopardy.
is true. The names have been
$2 for a fine.
We had a lot going on this
Well, I'll explain the rules. I will give you the clue, and you have to be the first to give the correct response in the form of a question. Raise your hand, and remember to ask in the form of a question. I keep repeating that because it doesn't seem to connect. All right, here we go. When you talk to this man, he will draw you a plan. No wonder this Rotarian's favorite color is blue. Yes. Who is Jim Young? Yes, come on up and get your colored pencils. Come on, Dan. Yes, good. Oh, you are so smart. Good for you. Our first speaker this morning is Judge Tom Parker. I'm very pleased to introduce him. I had the pleasure of working with him at Retzel and Andrus Law Firm, and he was a terrific trial attorney. He is now a judge in Common Pleas Court, and since I'm a mediator there, I have the pleasure of hearing what people say about him. And they always say that he's well prepared, he reviews all his own case files, does his own pre-trials, he respects the parties as well as the attorneys. So I introduce and welcome Judge Tom Parker.
Good morning, everyone. It's certainly a pleasure to be here today. I wonder if I'm really the warm-up act for the main speakers. Tina Rogner and David Warhatch, or maybe I'm a buffer for them. I'm not sure. You have to put me right between. I'm really glad to be here today. It's certainly a privilege to come to the Hudson Rotary Club. When I think of Rotary, I can't help but think of my now deceased stepdad, who was a Rotarian forever. And so forever, I got to hear all the really cool or corny jokes that he shared with me about that. But I have to come and talk today, and I wanted to talk about a topic that I'm very passionate about, and it really comes home to me because I'm actually running for re-election this year. And the issue really has to do with all the judges. When you go to vote, and some of you have already voted, you'll note that the most things that you'll be voting for on the ballot, the most races, will be judicial races. So when you look at your ballot this year, there are 11 different judicial races in Summit County, and 2 other Ohio Supreme Court races. So that's a total of 13 different positions that are going to be elected, 26 different candidates. And the question I like to go around and ask people when I get a chance to speak is, what do all these people do? And if for you as voters, how on earth could you possibly know how to make decisions in those races? One of the men at the table this morning said, it's almost unfair to the voters. And that's really true. So what I like to do when I go around, and this is not an election speech, is to do a little bit of education so that people who do want to be informed can have a better shot at understanding what it is they're participating in when they vote in these kinds of elections. So just to give you a brief overview, and this is not to take you back to 8th grade civics class, but in some respects it may have a feel for that. I just wanted to tell you again who it is that you're voting for and what they actually do. So with your permission, I'd like this to be a little bit interactive. I know that it's being filmed, but I may ask a question or two, and I know Rotarians like to answer questions. So if I ask you a question you feel like you just flatly don't know the answer, don't worry about it. Most people don't. All right? So we have in the state of Ohio 2 parallel court systems that are right within the state. And most people don't appreciate that. Where I work is in the Court of Common Pleas. There is another parallel court system in the state that has similar but not exactly the same jurisdiction as we have. Can anyone name what that might be? It's the municipal court system. So when you hear about somebody going to court, they're either going to go in Ohio to the Court of Common Pleas or they're going to go to the municipal court. Now, you vote for municipal court judges in odd-numbered years, at least currently, and you vote for the county or common pleas court judges in even-numbered years. The Chief Justice, Maureen O'Connor, is advocating that we move all judicial elections to odd-numbered years and put them all at the top of the ballot instead of the bottom of the ballot so that we can bring a different sense to these races. But that would put even more judicial elections on your ballot and make it even harder to discern who to choose. So we have the municipal court and we have the common pleas court. What's the difference? Does anyone know the difference between these 2 courts? See? No, the lawyers are not allowed to answer the questions. The municipal courts are charged with the responsibility of dealing with all of the misdemeanor cases that come up in the criminal law. They also deal with civil cases at the lower dollar level. So if somebody has a small claims case, they've got an eviction case, they've got a case where the amount of money at stake is less than $15,000, they go to the municipal court for that. The advantage of municipal court is that the cases move through the court more quickly. You can still have a jury trial, but it's a system that tends to move a little bit faster because the cases tend to be a little bit smaller and more manageable. In the Court of Common Pleas, on the other hand, we are responsible for all of the felony cases that get filed in Ohio. Now, felonies, by definition, are more serious crimes. We have multiple levels of them, and they range from lower-level drug offenses up to capital murder cases. I'm currently involved in one of those. So in the Common Pleas Court, we get the more serious criminal cases. We also are responsible for civil case jurisdiction, however. So if a foreclosure case has been filed in Ohio, it comes to the Court of Common Pleas. If a medical malpractice case or any civil case involving dollar claims where the amount at stake is of a higher level, it comes to the Court of Common Pleas. But what many people don't realize is that we also have cases down at the $50 range. Now, why someone would bring that to a Court of Common Pleas is not really certain, but they do. And Allison, as one of our mediators, gets to help resolve those disputes. So those are our parallel court systems in Ohio, but there is another court system in Ohio that also is responsible for cases that come into the court where you can have a jury trial and have your dispute resolved. Does anyone know what that one would be? Yet another court system that exists that sits in the state. Now, Dave can't answer.
Well, I think it's the federal court.
It is the federal court system. So people often ask, well, what's the difference between a federal district or trial judge and what someone like me might do? The federal courts are generally responsible for cases that involve questions of federal law. So if someone has an issue where they want to challenge or bring an issue up in respect to a bankruptcy matter, that would go into a federal bankruptcy court. If there was a dispute over how to interpret a federal statute, federal court. If there's a federal crime, that goes to federal court. But federal courts also are entitled to hear disputes between people of different states. So if somebody from Wisconsin, say, gets sued, they've got a Wisconsin business and they get sued in an Ohio case because of a product they sold, they could bring that case to federal court. so that they could not have their case decided before a local judge. So disputes between people of different states can go to federal court. Now, oftentimes people hear about some judge who made a ruling on a case that invalidated a state statute. Where would that go? Does anyone have a sense of that? Well, not exactly. If somebody wants to bring a challenge to the constitutionality of a statute, it can go to federal court. If the person contends that an Ohio piece of legislation violates the principles of the United States Constitution, that can go to federal court. But it also can come to me in the Court of Common Pleas. And in fact, in my time on the bench, I've been asked to make rulings on 3 different cases where the basic contention was that either a state statute or a county ordinance was unconstitutional on federal constitutional principles. So there is a situation where an Ohio Common Pleas Court judge can make a ruling on a case that would end up in the Ohio Supreme Court. And then, depending on how the Ohio Supreme Court decides the matter, it can go up to the United States Supreme Court. As one example, I was asked to decide whether an Ohio citizen has a right to bear arms under the Second Amendment outside their home. The United States Supreme Court has decided that citizens have the right to keep and bear arms inside their home. But the question that was raised in this particular suit was, does that right to bear arms extend once you step outside the 4 corners of your house? And an individual who had been charged under one of Ohio's criminal statutes argued that his constitutional rights were being infringed when he got charged for carrying a weapon in his motor vehicle. So in that situation, I had to decide whether this Ohio statute that had long existed was constitutional under the United States Constitution. That decision got sent up to a court of appeals. So let me talk about the next issue, which is where do the cases go for appeals? Now, I've said we have 2 parallel court systems in Ohio, but we only have 1 appellate system. So any case that gets decided in any trial court in Ohio, whether it's the municipal court or the Court of Common Pleas, goes to a court of appeals that would be a state court of appeals. And we have 12 districts in the state of Ohio, each of which has a number of different judges. In our area, Summit, Wayne, Medina, and Lorain counties, we are in the 9th appellate court district, and we have 5 judges that serve there. So any case that comes out of my court that somebody may want to appeal goes to the 9th District Court of Appeals. And there are similar courts throughout the state. There is also a federal appellate system. So you've heard of the 6th Circuit Court of Appeals in Cincinnati. That's a court that hears appeals out of every federal district in Ohio and Michigan, Tennessee. So there are parallel appellate systems as well. If you look beyond that, if somebody has a concern with a decision that's been made in the 9th District Court of Appeals and sometimes in an Ohio trial court, they take that case up to the Ohio Supreme Court. Now, the Ohio Supreme Court only has limited mandatory jurisdiction, so it gets to decide which cases it will take. The only cases it must take are death penalty appeals. So the law has been changed a number of years ago. If somebody is sentenced to death, their case automatically goes to the Ohio Supreme Court for further review. But otherwise, the Ohio Supreme Court gets to select the cases that are generally thought to be of greater public importance. And the same is true for the United States Supreme Court. There's very limited jurisdiction for the U.S. Supreme Court that's mandatory. So there's my little civics lesson that gives you an overview of what all these different judges do. But let me just take a couple more minutes to talk to you about the Court of Common Pleas, because that's where I work. And when you go to vote, you're going to see that this year you have 10 Court of Common Pleas races on your ballot. So what do all these people do? The Court of Common Pleas in Summit County actually consists of 4 different divisions, including 14 judges. Now, there is a domestic relations court. You all know what that is. Not because you've been there, but you probably know somebody who has. And they deal with issues that are related to marriage and children. We have a juvenile court. That name is obviously self-evident as well. They deal with issues related to children. Then there is the probate court, where people go to have wills and guardianships dealt with. Everyone in Summit County is served by a single probate judge, a single juvenile court judge, and we have 2 domestic relations judges. So that leaves the rest of us. The remaining 10 of us are general division judges, and as I mentioned, our responsibility is in regard to felony criminal cases and larger civil cases. So when you go to vote, the ballot will not tell you each of these different things. What they will tell you is it's for example, Court of Common Pleas, term commencing such and such date. And each of us runs against one other person. We are not 11 on 11. It's 1-on-1 in each of the races. And Summit County is unique, as David would know. In the state of Ohio, we are one of the few counties in the entire state where almost all the time, every single judicial election is contested. And we can thank our political leaders for that. There doesn't seem to be much thought in this county that someone who's actually doing a good job as a judge and gets high ratings ought to run without an opponent. And I'm not here today to advocate that we ought to have that, but if you feel like you're voting for more judges than almost anyone else you know, it's because you are. And that's just the way it goes. Now, one more quick closing thought, actually 2. People who are well-informed citizens, as all of you are, find it absolutely daunting to figure out who to select when they go to vote. So fortunately for us this year, the Akron Bar Association has tried to do something about this, and I think it's going to expand in years to come. So if you're a person who likes to go and look things up on the internet, we now have a website established by the Akron Bar Association that at least collects information about the judicial candidates, and which tells you how the lawyers on the Bar Association have rated the judicial candidates. And it's a really easy name to remember. If you look at ubthejudgesummitcounty.com, you'll be able to get information about every single one of these races. So if you can invest 15, 20 minutes, you'll be a lot more informed than you are right now. So one concluding thought. People ask me about magistrates, because there are a lot of people running for judge this year who happen to be magistrates. And they say, what's the difference between a judge and a magistrate? And that's a very good question. The way I would describe it is that a magistrate gets to handle and is responsible to handle those things that the judge assigns to him or her. Under the court rules in Ohio, the magistrates have specific jurisdiction that allows them to decide certain kinds of matters. But the one thing magistrates generally cannot do is sign an order of the court. They can make a recommendation to the judge, and then the judge ultimately has to decide the issue. The other thing that needs to be kept in mind is that magistrates generally do not try jury cases. So if you've ever been in a jury trial, it more than likely was before a judge and not a magistrate. So there's my little civics lesson overview on what I would like to tell you about who are all these people and what do they do. It is a topic I feel very passionate about, and I do encourage you all to take the steps to be informed before you vote. I would love to be able to stay and answer questions for you today, but I actually am in the middle of a capital murder trial right now, and I'm due on the bench. I have to be in court in about 30 minutes down in Akron, so I'm going to have to take leave. But I thank you for the opportunity to be here. I thank Allison for the invitation to come and speak. I wish I could stay in here the next 2 speakers speak, because I'm sure it's going to be lively. So having said that, I thank you for your time. Thank you.
We can't let him go away empty-handed, so we've got a Rotary mug. Here you are.
Thank you.
Lucky guy.
Thank you.
All right, now we're ready for the lively portion, right? So we've got Christina Rogner and David Warhatch. We'll get these chairs moved, and James, I need a microphone for our... We need our draft.
Really does.
Have you shared that?
No Rocky thing?
No, Rocky. We can offer you Dragnet and Jeopardy. Alrighty, so I'm going to give a brief introduction to each person here, and then we'll do some questions and answers. And we've got our acting sergeant at arms who's got his time cards, an old trick from debate, just so that we don't spend all our time on one question and one answer. And we're trying to give both candidates a fair amount of time. So first of all, Christina, currently in her second term as our state representative, Ohio House of Representatives, District 37. In Columbus, Christina serves on the Education Committee, the Manufacturing and Workforce Development Committee, and Vice Chair of the Public Utilities Committee. She holds a Bachelor's of Science degree in Mechanical Engineering from Tufts University and her MBA in Finance from the Wharton School of Business. James, isn't that your alma mater? Yes, it is. Christina was elected twice to the Hudson City Council. She served as a member from 2005 to 2010. Our second person today, David Warhatch, a Hudson Democrat, is Christina's opponent for Ohio representative. He graduated from Notre Dame Law School. He is in his 35th year in practice as an attorney with extensive litigation, negotiation, and client counseling experience. He has focused his legal career on the rights of individuals in the workplace. David was a Hudson Township trustee and later sat on the first City Council of Hudson. He has been a member of the Summit County Central Committee for nearly 20 years. So, at the end of our question and answer, we'll give each of the candidates an opportunity to do a wrap-up or share with us whatever they'd like to say. But our first question is from Gail Royster. So Tom is going to do his job as passing around the microphone to the audience.
Thank you. Would each of you describe what you feel is your single most important characteristic that qualifies you for the job? The single most characteristic.
Okay, is this on?
Yes.
So my single most strongest characteristic I believe that I would bring to the table would be my experience, and that includes experience both with finance, my background, my MBA from Wharton, my work that I did at McKinsey & Company before, but also the experience from Hudson City Council, having been elected, and this was a pleasure to serve you in that role for 2 terms, and then also experience here in the state legislature. We've had tremendous results in the last almost 4 years now. When we came into office, if you remember back to January of 2011, Ohio was grim at the time. We had unemployment was over 9%. We had 89 cents in the rainy day fund. We were at the bottom of the barrel when it came to job creation in the state. We were like 47th in the nation. But we got to work. We made some hard choices. We've turned Ohio. Ohio is making a comeback. So that the unemployment that was at over 9% is now under 6. It's 5.7%. The rainy day fund that had 89 cents in it, thank you, is now 1.5 billion. So we've done some great things, and so that experience, I would say, and our track record is the #1 qualification. Thank you.
Good morning. The single most important characteristic I think I can bring to the table is the single most important characteristic I bring to my clients that I represent every day. I represent individuals that are victimized in the work setting in all areas of labor and employment law except for workers' compensation. We have a detail-oriented, results-driven practice. And think about the role of a legislature. If the legislator is not detail-oriented and looks out for your interests, the legislator is not doing his or her job. You have to have courage, conviction, strong character. You have to be willing to stand up and speak up even against your own party when you know that what they're doing is wrong. I know that everyone, well, not everyone, but most people in this room will know that I am not afraid to speak up when I see something is wrong. I'm not a wallflower. I'm a detail-oriented, results-driven individual who can deliver results for this district in ways that our current state representative has failed to do for the last 4 years.
Any other questions from the audience?
Morning. Thank you for being here. Let me adjust the camera. I get to ask questions and run the camera. So again, thank you for coming today. Being on the school board, you know, I'm a one-issue guy. Especially in this district, we have some of the best public schools not only in the state but in the country. And so my question is, right now, what we've seen over the last 10 years is a reduction in the funding for public schools. The taxes, the business property tax is going away, the replacement for that's going away. And we've also seen straight reduction in terms of the outright funding. On top of that, we've seen a huge increase in funding for charter schools. I believe it's about $90 million spent this year. Within that, we've seen that about 80% of those funds are going to schools that are failing. There's also a dropout program. About 20 million is going to schools that's only graduated, I think, less than 1% of those dropout recovery. So my question is this, will we continue those funds? Are those really a good payout? Or could we, given the state finances and the desire to keep the budget low, could we redirect those to the schools that are doing well?
David, you want to start?
I believe that in order to fuel the engine of economic growth, public education is a very important priority. What has happened lately in the legislature is that the Republicans in the legislature undervalue public education and overemphasize charter schools to the detriment of most of the very good school districts. In the 37th Ohio House District, every single school district has a grade, overall grade of B or better, Hudson having an A. The charter schools, students in the 37th Ohio House District that attend charter schools, 98% of them are attending schools that are rated C or lower. We're putting $3.6 million a year into the charter schools that are servicing the students from the 37th Ohio House District, and 98% of them are attending schools that are worse in terms of grading than the school they could be attending if they didn't go to the charter school. $18.7 million. That's the amount of money that the Republicans have taken away from public schools in Summit County during my opponent's 4 years in office. We have a $908 million going to charter schools. $908 million for 121,000 students. And yet we can't find the funding for our public schools. The choices that are made with respect to investing in public education are going to be inextricably intertwined with the job growth prospects in this state. What I hope to do as a next state legislator from this district is to try to refocus the state's policies so as to be able to make sure that public education is in fact emphasized. The problem with what we have now is that when they passed the budget, the Republicans essentially decided that they were going to favor the richest 5% of Ohioans at the expense of 95% of other property owners. As a result, the property tax burden over the next 5 years will increase by 12.5% without a vote of the people, just so the richest 5% can get $1.5 billion in tax breaks. I'm for putting all people first in Ohio, not just the wealthy few. And I hope that you will consider that as you cast your ballot this year.
Thank you. With regard to education, that is something that is very near and dear to my heart. I have 3 young daughters. They're in 8th grade, 6th grade, and 3rd grade. I have some in private schools. I have my middle daughter is in the Hudson Middle School and loves it. We are blessed here in this district with tremendous schools, and particularly here in Hudson, with our school ranking as high as it is. It's phenomenal. We're thrilled to have her there. I do serve on the education committee down in Columbus, and I have for my last 2 terms. Ohio now is actually funding its schools. The state funding is at its highest levels in history. But you know what? It's not just money that's the issue. Just we have to think beyond that. We need to think about reforms. For example, let me just give you an example. We instituted recently the 3rd grade reading guarantee. And what that means before in the state of Ohio, students would go 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, say they couldn't read. We kept passing them along. They get to high school, those are the dropouts. Those are the ones that'll leave. So what we did, we said, you know what? In 3rd grade, we're going to stay, we're going to give them a test. Can you read or not? And if you can't, we're going to help. We are going to help you. In fact, we're going to help you through 1st, 2nd, all the way through. And if you can't read, we're going to keep you in reading in the 3rd grade, and we're going to let you advance in the other grades, but we care about you enough to make sure that you can read. So that's an example of the reforms that we're looking at beyond just the funding. Funding is also important, but I said the state funding is at its highest level in history. In terms of charter schools, I do believe that there's not one solution for all students. For example, I have 2 in the private schools. I've got 1 in the public schools. They're different. Each child is different, and each child there's going to be an environment where they can learn best, and we need to make sure that they go there. In terms of the charter schools, I agree. I think there should be accountability for the charter schools, particularly those ones that are failing. And if they're receiving state money, we should hold them accountable. So that's it. Thank you.
1 minute for a rebuttal. Yes.
For 4 years, our state representative has talked about accountability and transparency and has done nothing to put any bill before the House to cause the charter schools to be accountable. Right now, our public money is not subject to their audit. We cannot get in there with Public Records Act requests to get access to information to find out if they're in fact accountable. If you're going to talk about funding being the highest ever, you have to talk in terms of real terms. 19 years ago, the Supreme Court declared that you can't rely entirely on the property tax. You realize that in real terms, Representative Rogner, public education has had 0 growth in 19 years. 0. The only growth has been with charter schools. And if you're going to talk about having the 3rd grade reading guarantee, then I would suggest you make sure that the schools have the resources necessary in order to achieve those results.
Thank you. You have 1 minute.
Rebuttal, thank you.
Yes.
Okay. So actually, my opponent mentioned something in the previous statement, but also recently now, which is he implies that I won't vote against my party. But I would like to point out that, in fact, many times I have. I am the Republican. But in many cases, I have voted with the Democrats on some very important issues. One has to do with transparency. Jobs Ohio is an example. I was the only Republican to vote with the Democrats to say that, yes, we should, in fact, audit Jobs Ohio. On this latest budget, I actually was a no vote when it came out of the conference committee. I was only 1 of 4 Republicans no vote. There were many things I liked in that budget, but there were some things I didn't. One example was that homestead exemption. So, I do vote my conscience. I will vote independently. I do what I believe is the right thing, not only for Ohio, but for specifically the citizens in our district. Thank you.
All righty, moving on. Art?
This couple questions for Mr. Warhatch, please. You seem to think, or I seem to be hearing, I guess, that you're not only not in favor of the charter schools, but that somehow this is a Republican issue. Is that your feeling, that it's more of a Republican issue than a Democratic issue? Second of all, you kind of stated that Representative Rogner has failed to do many things over the last 4 years. Can you be more specific, please?
I can. How many hours would you like?
3 minutes.
No, I don't consider the charter school issue a Republican issue. I consider it an Ohio problem. Charter schools, if you had a chance to read any of my answers to these various questionnaires that candidates get from all kinds of special interest groups, you'll find out that my answers on charter schools varied depending on the purpose of the charter school. We can't have children lagging behind when you have districts that are not performing or on economic crisis. In those situations, charter schools can provide an important safety net for those children in the interim while the adults get the act together in the public school system. So I'm not against charter schools per se. But I am against the fact that they are not accountable to anybody. We cannot audit them. And this is what the Republicans in the legislature have created. No Democrat voted for unaccountability, for no accountability for charters. A second part of your question dealt with.
You said that Christina had failed at
Oh, yes.
many things.
Yes, the many things she's done, failed to do. You know, one of the things that's important about the legislative process is that you actually have debate over issues. Her favorite vote is to table measures that are proposed by Democrats to try to have a debate on different aspects of different parts of the bills. She has failed to put any bill forward to address this accountability issue for charter schools. She has failed to address questions relating to accountability and promoting the issues in the among the members of her caucus for other agencies within the state government. She takes a position, as she said in the editorial board interview with the Beacon Journal, that when she feels that something that her own party members are backing is wrong, she will not stand up on the floor of the House to talk about it. Instead, she just casts a vote against it. Well, if you can actually get 10 members of the Republican caucus to go along with you, Representative Rogner, you've got 39 members of the Democratic caucus probably going to join you. That's a bill. Why don't you do that? You're not delivering for the district. The problem here is a matter of omission, not doing the job of a legislator. And that's what I'm asking the voters of the 37th district to do in deciding to replace her this year.
Christina?
It has been a pleasure to serve you as your state representative here. Where do I even begin with that? I mean, there's, you know, when I do vote, like I mentioned, my conscience. I have voted many times with the Democrats on many key issues, as I mentioned, from Jobs Ohio, transparency, to the Turnpike, to even this latest budget. Yeah, and I do occasionally. I will speak up on the floor against the Republican bills. I have done it. I don't do it often, but I will cast my vote, and that's the most important thing. One of the things that I've really enjoyed working as your state representative is helping to solve the issues that are affecting our district. I mean, we talk about so many of these broad reaching things from the taxes, and we've done great things here. By the way, I'd like to mention we reduced the income tax by 10% here in the state of Ohio. We got rid of the estate tax in the state of Ohio. I mean, those are some big things. We've instituted common sense regulatory reform. We've turned the state of Ohio around. I mean, those are some very big things. But also on a smaller level, and I don't talk about this too much, but people will come to my office hours and say, you know, we've got an issue with one thing or another. And let me just give you a couple examples. One was the Western Reserve Academy came and said, you know, we wanted to go to Niagara Falls. We wanted to take a school bus, but we found out in the Ohio Revised Code, we can only go 150 miles out of state. Can you help us with that? Sure. You know, so I got together with a Democratic colleague, and together we got a bill passed and signed into law extending that mileage so that you can ride a school bus far longer than anyone in this room would want to sit on a school bus around the state of Ohio. Another one was working with hyperbaric chambers. A doctor from our district came in and said, hey, you know, there's a rule in the state of Ohio that a nurse has to sit by this hyperbaric chamber the whole time. It doesn't make sense. I'm in the room. I could do with a hyperbaric technician. Okay, you know, so we got a bill drafted. We get it through all the committees, get it through the floor of the House, passes unanimously through the Senate. That's also become law. So, I mean, there are so many different things that we're working on down in the state of Ohio. You know, and I've loved it. I've loved every minute of it, and I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to serve you in that capacity.
Ma'am.
1 minute.
House Bill 582 is what Representative Rogner is working on right now to cause the Buckeye to be recognized as the official confection of the state of Ohio. Instead of working with Representative Barbarack, a Democrat, in trying to fix this problem created by making the homestead exemption largely unavailable anymore starting in 2016 for seniors in the state of Ohio, she's working on the Buckeye bill.
I need a rebuttal for this.
You'll have your minute.
May I finish? Thank you. The issue on omission is that she doesn't take the time to address the issues that affect us mostly in this district. We're very proud when it comes to the matters of our public schools, and yet our public schools are being hurt by these policies. I would urge you to ask Representative Rogner what she has done to address public school education in this state other than cut the funds.
Christina?
Where do I even start with that one? This confection. So we have some bills that come through. They're motherhood and apple pie. You don't actually work on them. You read them. They're short little bills. Sure, you know, you can, most people co-sponsor those. But we are working on a lot of very, very important things. If my opponent had done his homework, he would have realized that, in fact, he mentioned this homestead exemption. You know, I do have a bill. I have it drafted. I've sent out for a co-sponsor request to restore the homestead exemption. And it has received many bipartisan co-sponsors to it. And as soon as we get back in session, that bill is ready to drop. So it is a bipartisan bill. I'm proud to have drafted it, and I believe it'll gain tremendous support. So thank you.
Rich, you have a question?
Yes, thank you both for coming this morning, and thank you for the lively dialogue so far. I guess this is more geared towards Christina. Being a CPA and having over 100 closely held businesses in Ohio, I want to commend you and your party for not only the 10% reduction in personal income tax rates over X amount of years, but what's been a major home run, and maybe you can comment on this based on what you know so far, or know in the future, I guess, is there's a 50% phase out or reduction in an S-corp partnership or Schedule C income on the shareholder / partner / sole proprietor's return, which has been a major home run in 13, and now K6 increased that to 75% in 14. Are you aware of those provisions, Christina?
Yes.
Okay, my question is, is that 75% going to continue into the future? I realize it was only passed for this year only, but I can also tell you that the small business owners are feeling that they are getting the attention that they have not received in years. That's the feedback. Of course, anytime you save somebody money. I'm sorry?
Last statement again?
The small business owners are feeling or basically telling me that they feel that state of Ohio, that the Republican Party cares about them by putting money back or keeping money in their treasury or in their bank accounts. So can you comment on that provision and where it might go in the future?
Absolutely. And if I could just for a minute step back, one of the things that I believe and my colleagues believe is that to improve the economy in the state of Ohio, our philosophy has been, let's set the stage that's inviting to business, and then let the private sector, the small businesses that you're referring to, medium-sized businesses, create the jobs. And so what does that mean? Because the government doesn't really create the jobs that we're talking about to improve the economy. What can we do? Well, we can affect the tax climate. The government can affect that. We can also do regulatory reform, and we can affect the labor market. So these are sort of the things that we can do that set the table that will be inviting to businesses. So you're talking about the taxes. That was one of the things that we are very proud to have been able to accomplish. Not only the 10% income tax reduction for all Ohioans, but also these small business taxes that you're referring to. Will it continue? As long as we're in, then yes. It's called the Ohio Revised Code for a reason, so it can always change. It depends who you elect into office. But if we're still in the majority, then yes, I would see that continuing, and I think it should. I'm certainly. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, if I, I'm only, by the way, I am one of 99 representatives, and there's 33 senators, and that just makes up the General Assembly, and of course we have our own governor. But yeah, I mean, the way, from where I'm sitting, what we're doing to help the small businesses thrive, that's what we want to keep doing because the results are showing here in the state of Ohio, and it's good. As a CPA, you might also be interested in that House Bill 5, which is a municipal income tax bill. Well, the state, there are only a handful of states, by the way, that allow municipalities to tax. And Ohio is like the only one that allows each municipality to do it differently. So the CPAs are supportive of a bill that we just passed through the Ohio House, and it's in the Senate right now, which will sort of bring some uniformity to the different municipal taxes. We don't collect it centrally. It'll still stay a local collection, but all the sort of the regulations or rules around those tax forms would be the same. So that should also help small businesses. And I know the Ohio Society of CPAs, who endorse me, are supportive of that. Thank you.
David, do you have any comments?
Yes, I do. I don't suppose I'll have your vote, but let me explain why I think the tax policies of the state are misguided at this stage. I'm a small businessman. Supposedly, this 50% now 75% reduction or exclusion of my profits in my business is supposed to spur me on to increasing the number of job opportunities in my firm. Well, I can assure you that it's not going to affect my decisions on how many people I hire in my firm at all. My business is the way it is, and it's not going to change very much. And the fact that I've gotten a 50% reduction, or rather exclusion, from my income tax because I run a small business is not making any one bit of difference in deciding whether I'm going to hire any additional people. And I think that's basically the problem all around the state of Ohio, and the fact that this was a giveaway as part of changing the way in which we tax in the state of Ohio so that the wealthy few end up with the greatest benefits in the taxes. The so-called 10% across the board reduction in income taxes is actually a misnomer because it's a progressive income tax structure, which means that the more you make and the more you're taxed, the more you're going to get in terms of what that 10% is worth to you, which means that the disposable income that would be generated by that tax reduction is not going to go to the people who will spend it on capital goods and other goods and services and therefore generate demand and fuel the engine of economic growth. No, it will go to the wealthy few so they can buy an extra fancy dinner and then put the rest in their portfolios to make millions more. That's what's going on. The state of Ohio has too many problems that we can resolve by adjusting tax policy, but it's got to be just in the way it's going to benefit the most. The programs of the state legislature are neither fair nor beneficial to all. They aren't. And I'm asking you to search your soul at this time, because what they're doing is wrong to all of society. The question of the tax policy does beg one other question that I think that the people of the state of Ohio need to know about. $7.7 billion, that's with a B, dollars worth of tax money is lost every year by the Treasury because of exemptions, exclusions, deductions, etc. And yet, Representative Rogner has not put any bill forward to require any of those programs to be subjected to periodic scrutiny. If we could only find 10% of waste in $7.7 billion, then like Ross Perot said, pretty soon that adds up to real money. If you can't find 10%, then maybe I'm not the right guy for the job, but at least I'll try. And if we get $770 million extra into the budget without having to raise $1 of tax, imagine the way we could bridge the gap in the cutting of the state funds for public education.
All right, you each have 1 minute for a closing, whatever you want to close with.
So I'd just like to start by thanking you guys for giving me the opportunity to serve you as your state representative. I think we've come a long way in the state of Ohio. We've accomplished many wonderful things, from unemployment being improved to the tax burden also being improved. I mean, we've turned the state around, but we still have a long way to go. I would be honored to continue to serve as your state representative. I'd like to make myself as accessible as possible to everyone in the district. I'd also invite you to contact me if you have any additional questions. And for those watching, please visit my website. It's at ChristinaDailyrogner.com, or call me. My cell phone number is 330-322-5325. I want to thank you again. And on your way out, there are signs there. I have yard signs. I've also, if those run out, I've got more in my car. So I just want to thank you again. And I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I, too, would like to thank the Rotary for inviting me. My website is davidforohio.com, and my phone number is 330-615-OH37. That will be the district telephone number when I get elected, 330-615-OH37. Ohio is at a crossroads. We have real choices to make. Fortunately, this is one of the races in Ohio that is being focused on by the Columbus Dispatch and other agencies in the state. We have a real opportunity to send a strong message to the people of the state of Ohio. By all rights, I'm a moderate Democrat, and by all rights, I should be a Republican. But I am not a Republican because this is no longer the party of Lincoln. This is the party of the few, by the few, and for the few. We need to make it again of the people, by the people, for the people, and put people first in Ohio. I'm David Warhatch, and I hope I have your vote in November. Thank you.
Thank you both. We now have Rotabuck, and while we'll get somebody, I wouldn't know which candidate to ask, so I'm not going to have you there.
Feeling good. Last four digits, 9660. 9660. Sorry.
Somebody who came in before me. Oh, Tom. That's what he gets for being a greeter. $13 in our payout. Jackpot, $126.
Is that a service alert? Yeah. Not again. Oh my God, again. That's my payback for working at the camp today. There you go.
Oh, no, too bad. We have a board meeting right after this meeting, and there's a sign-up going around for our 5th Wednesday social.
My lunch money.
Have a great day.